Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's another edition of the program. It's Lettermen Row. It is Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I am Spencer Holbrook. We're going to talk Ohio State football like we do almost every day here on the YouTube channel, like we do every day over at lettermenrow.com. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. $1 per week for an entire year. That's $52 a year, but instead you could just pay $1 a week, and then you won't even realize it's coming out of your bank account. That's the joy of $1 per week for an entire year. Go to lettermenrow.com, get that sale right now. We don't run it very often, so make sure you go over there right now, get that deal at lettermenrow.com. Like I said, Mick Walker on the other side of that screen. I'm Spencer. We are feeling a little blue today. We're both wearing some blue, not coordinated, just a freak occurrence, but we'll roll with it. You feeling blue about anything, Mick, or are you doing all right?
I'm doing pretty good. We're feeling blue about having stuff to write about. Not a lot going on. Honestly, I'm ready for some spring ball, ready to have some interesting stuff, some visitors to get on campus. But in the meantime, we can talk about guys that are this spring is important for, which I know you wrote about yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because this is such a young roster. I'm a big Google Sheets guy. Like, I have spreadsheets for everything. I have spreadsheets for vacations. I have spreadsheets for with my friends for stupid reasons. I have spreadsheets to keep track of what I say on here, what I write about. I have a spreadsheet. It is the scholarship chart, and I just keep it for myself just to make sure I know who the 85 are on the roster, and then have some walk-ons on the side. I pulled that up to start to write this story yesterday that I wrote for LettermenRow.com, the 5 Buckeyes who need to make their now or never push for playing time this spring and this winter. And it was slim pickings, man. Like, the amount of guys they're sending over to the NFL Combine next week, the amount of guys that they're bringing in from the transfer portal and through this freshman recruiting class, there's not a lot of veterans that need to make the push. They're either already entrenched in this thing or they're out of the program, because if you're not playing in 3 or 4 years here at Ohio State anymore, you're out. And so I think it's interesting just to do this exercise. You've seen the list that we put out, but before we start, is there any guy who kind of crossed your mind that wasn't on the list of guys who I have here as need to make the push in a now or never fashion? Because I couldn't find any additional guys. So I wanted to know if I missed anyone.
No, I think really the biggest one is you put, to give away the last name on the list, is Tegra Tshabola, who is who obviously started at right guard for Ohio State for all season last year, made every start, I believe.
Yeah.
I think you could put a Tegra Tshabola or Austin Sarabelt or Luke Montgomery, because obviously I think there might have been some faith if you retain Justin Fry as your offensive line coach that you can keep this 3-guard rotation coming. I don't know with the new offensive line coach if they're going to be gung-ho about running a 3-guard rotation. So I think it's a big spring for all 3 of those guys, because I think all 3 of them conceivably could start it somewhere else, whether that's if they enter the portal in the spring or just after next season. So I think it's a big spring for all 3 of them, because 2 of them probably need to come out of it as starters, and then you're going to have the third one either fighting or moving spots or training. I just don't know what that third spot comes. And I think Tegra is probably the odd man out going into it, even though he's the guy that started all 16 games or whatever it was last year, just because I think there's a lot of faith in what Luke Montgomery did in that back half and what Austin Sarabelt can be when he's fully healthy.
Did you ever see the movie Gung Ho? You said Gung Ho. Did you ever see with Michael Keaton?
I have not. It comes from I think the term comes from my dad. I remember hearing him say it.
You should. You don't really have to watch it. It's fine. It's not great. It's from 1986. It's got Michael Keaton in it. Some of the people who were watching have seen Gung Ho, and they're like, "Oh, that was terrible," or some people are like, "Oh, that was good. It's funny." Go check it out, Mick, if you haven't seen. But anyway, that's derailing the conversation, and we're only 5 minutes into this thing. No, I think that the Tegra one was interesting, because as I was writing it, I was like, is it worth putting him in there? Do we need to have him there? But if Luke Montgomery and Austin Sarabelt do really well in the winter and then into spring, you could see Tegra Tshabola a 16-game starter on the bench, almost like Carson Hinsman was this year when Seth McLaughlin took his spot, and he was the backup center until he had to come in and be the starting center for the national championship run, which he ultimately was, and he'll be the starting center for this year, barring something unforeseen. Or a push from Josh Padilla that moves him to guard, and then everything gets thrown into whack. But if Tshabola's not good, or if he's even fine in winter workouts and into spring, I just think there's a world in which he's the third tackle instead of being one of the mainstays, the starters, or third guard instead of one of the mainstays or the starters. And so, I think there's some positional flexibility with him. He could play tackle. Maybe Bowen sees him as a tackle, and then he pushes one of those transfers for a tackle spot. Maybe that right tackle spot with Phillip Daniels becomes a Tshabola Daniels battle rather than an Ian Moore Daniels battle. But I just think it's so critical for Tegra to come in locked in spring after a really good winter. Make sure that he's 100% healthy, ready to go, as my dad would say, ready to rock and roll, and get this thing going. Because again, if Saraveld continues his push from the beginning of the year, which I thought there was some injury there, and maybe he wasn't at his best in the playoff, but he was good enough. And if Montgomery keeps showing that he can be what he was in the college ball playoff at left guard, where he was just incredible, in my opinion, especially in that Notre Dame game, I thought he was really good. And the Oregon game, I thought he played well. Then I think like Tshabola could be, not on the outs. I'm not saying that he'd be like transfer, but I think that there's a world in which he's the third guard instead of one of the starters. And so, yeah, it's a great place to start. He's obviously on the list, and we'll go through the rest of the list here and just kind of talk about it a little bit. Let's get to the headliner here. Everybody on the Lettermen Lounge message board when I posted this story said, well, the list could have started and ended with this guy, because it is officially now or never for CJ Hicks, who is in his fourth year. He's a senior now. He's a former 5-star linebacker. Lettermen Row sources have indicated pretty heavily that he's making the move to the edge, whether that's in a stand-up role, whether that's in a hand-in-the-dirt role. We're not really sure yet. Matt Patricia can use him kind of any way he would like to because he's such a versatile athlete. I just don't think he fits in that Jim Knowles mold of what a linebacker should be. And so now he's going to play on the edge. I talked about yesterday a little bit that I think Sonny Styles should do a little bit of edge stuff too. But I think that's more a role for CJ Hicks considering what Sonny brings to the linebacker room. But it truly is, like I said, a now or never campaign here for CJ Hicks, because if he can get on the field and show that he has some juice off the edge, I think he could be a pretty high draft pick after the fall. But if he comes in and it doesn't look the way that he's hoping on the edge, then you're talking about a guy who kind of just maybe slipped through the cracks at Ohio State.
Yeah, and he's another guy, like, don't ever put guys in the portal, but if he were to show any interest in that, he's a guy that would have a ton of suitors just because of potentially moving him to, like you said, a stand-up outside linebacker role. And you and I have been doing this for long enough now to know that if there's a former 5-star that enters into the portal, they're always going to get some level of second chance just because of that type of talent is still in there, and it's what people saw coming out of high school. So, like you said, it's time for him to kind of show that he's the guy that I think everybody hoped he could be coming out of high school. You have to remember he was a guy that was not only a highly ranked prospect, but also a very loud recruiter, whether it was on social media or when just coming to games and whatnot. So I think he's somebody that people would like to see be successful. It's just time for it all to click. And I think coming closer to the line of scrimmage is the opportunity for him to do that. I think you and I even saw it. I can't remember. It was one of the later practices in the season where we got to see CJ Hicks, and he was kind of just repping one-on-one drills with Donovan Jackson at left tackle, kind of rushing the passer, just walking through their hand placement and the hand technique and the movement. So I think that's something that they've been working on a lot, is the move to defensive end. And I'm excited to see what CJ can do with it, because I know he's somebody that's very passionate about Ohio State, and I know he wants to be successful here. So this move should position him to do that. And now it's up to him to just continue to take it and run with it.
Well, and I mean, like, look at the edge, man. There's opportunity that's kind of knocking here, whether it's in the strong side or the weak side. JT and Jack were a little different in the way that they operated, and I know that they like to have those guys on certain sides of the field. I don't know how much that will continue. Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are kind of in that mold, I guess. Caden is more of a power rusher and a good, high motor guy, whereas Kenyatta is just a speed, bendy pass rusher in the truest sense of the word, like a true pass rusher. And then you got Logan George, who I think is more of one of those power guys. If you watch his film from Idaho State, it's not really apples to apples. It's hard to compare, but you think that some of those skills can translate, but it's a lot of power move, things like that. So if you have Caden and Logan George, who are both power rushers and good against the run and things of that like, and then you have Kenyatta Jackson and CJ Hicks as like your true pass rushers, I think that could be really beneficial for Ohio State on the edge to have two of each. You're almost like having, two pair to kind of work with and toy with. Not to mention that I think Edric Houston could do some stuff if they ever go 3 down on the edge. I think he could do some things on the interior from a pass rushing perspective. And then I think CJ could give you a lot from a rushman point of view. We didn't really see a ton of the rushman package this year for Ohio State because Tyleek and Ty were so good at getting to the passer. And then, the linebackers were such a big part of what Jim Knowles was doing with these blitz packages. But if you go back to a traditional rushman, the way that Larry Johnson used to operate in these pass rush settings, like who better to do that than number 11 there? And you see other guys around the country who they try to fit into a linebacker mold that just don't fit the linebacker mold. I'm thinking of Harold Perkins at LSU, and I'm thinking of early career Abdul Carter. And I don't want to compare CJ Hicks to those guys because Perkins is basically going to be a first-round pick in the 2026 draft based on one game his freshman year against Arkansas, and Abdul Carter made the move to the edge and basically became Micah Parsons. So, it's not like, CJ can just do that easily. But we've seen edge rushers before who have one generational or great season or wonderful impact on a team and become like first-team all-league, and then go on to be a really high draft pick. That's not out of the question. And I don't want to put those expectations on number 11, but I know that he wants to put those expectations on himself because I've gotten to know CJ pretty well over the last few years. Nobody wants this more than him. And so I think that now or never kind of puts it into perspective for him and says, okay, it's now, because it's not going to be never for him. I know the way that he's wired. I know what he wants to do. So I just think that he's so fascinating this spring, Mick. But the other guy that I wanted to talk about that I'm really high on, that I always have been high on, is the guy that one time Emeka Egbuka told me was Mr. Consistency. He does not drop the football. He is a guy who basically catches anything thrown his way, and he's just been waiting to get on the field. He was in the transfer portal, then he decided to come back. I'm talking about Bryson Rogers in year 3. I think this is a little bit more now or never for him than some people might think, just because of the talent that's behind him with Phillip Bell and Desi Jones and Quincy Porter, and then Mylon Graham, nipping at the heels there from a slot perspective as a second-year guy, former 5-star. Bryson played quite a bit compared to what we thought he would this past year. I'm thinking about those plays against Penn State where he and Brandon Ennis went on the field and Brandon caught the touchdown because Penn State thought it was going to be a run. But Bryson was on the field for some key moments in the playoff too. I think this is a huge winter and spring for him because if he can show that he can be a part of a rotation with Brandon Ennis and Carnell Tate and Mylon Graham, then I think you could be talking about a really fresh, fast wide receiver group for Ohio State that obviously is going to feature Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, but like you said, it's just tough because there's people nipping on his heels. I think Quincy Porter's going to have to play in some capacity this year. I think he's that talented. I think he's that good. And if you don't play him, you're just wasting the first year of having him on campus, and you're cutting yourself down having maybe 2 more years of Quincy Porter. So I think he's going to have to play on the outside. And I think that's very exciting for Ohio State to have 2 big bodies like him and Jeremiah Smith on the outside. But like you said, there's still the opportunity to play guys like Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. And then the thing that we don't really talk about, because we mentioned a lot the tight ends, but Max Clare is essentially, I assume, going to play a lot of slot snaps, get a lot of pass catching at work when it comes to just being out wide, some in line, but also being out wide or in the slot, because he's valuable out there just as a mismatch option against pretty much any linebacker they'll face. So if you include Max Clare into a slot option or a passing option out wide, then that's a 4th or a 5th guy that you're talking Bryson Rogers has to work over. So that's what really makes it now or never. Because if he's not able to assert himself in that top group, then I assume there's younger guys that are going to assert themselves above him. And then you're looking at a guy that's lacking playing time and probably going to need to find it somewhere else. But I do think there's a lot of people that like Bryson Rogers, both on the field and off the field. Like you said, people talk about him really highly. Emeka Egbuka talks about him really highly. And I know Emeka wouldn't just say that about anybody. I do think there's some people that Bryson has some dog in him now. It's just that you got to figure out how to get it out of there and get him out on the field, just like you got a little dog there on your shirt, Spence.
Yeah, I mean, Roback performance hoodies. I told you I'm wearing them all the time. You've seen me wear them. This isn't even an ad because, it kind of is, but we're not obligated to talk about them every single time we hop on the air. But I talk about them all the time because I'm wearing it. I am in some sort of rut right now. I need to be on the golf course. That's why I keep wearing these, because I feel like I'm ready for the golf course when I'm in these. Go to Roback.com, use the code Lettermen20 for 20% off any performance gear from Roback. and I will continue to plug them until the day I die because my wife gets tired of buying me Roback because she buys me so much. But the other thing we need to talk about, Mick, before we move on here, is the person who's catching these footballs was Bryson Rogers, but here is that football. It is a Nike ball. It is absolutely gorgeous. I am in love with these footballs. I was carrying it around the house yesterday because ball security is job security. I was just, kind of tucking it up, making sure that I wasn't going to fumble it around the house, make sure the cat wasn't trying to poke it loose or anything. The wait is over. Ohio State has clinched the national championship, and now you can own a piece of that historic victory. Introducing the official limited edition 2025 CFP Ohio State football. I got to get a case for this thing. The exact ball the Buckeyes used through the college football playoff and the national championship game. It's handcrafted and customized. It boasts the Nike's distinctive gray fractal swoosh, the Block O iconic Ohio State logo. Look at that thing. The official 2025 CFP emblem. It's gorgeous. The laces are really nice. They're stitched really well. Go to biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. Biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. I'll say it one more time. Biggameusa.com/Buckeyes and snag yours before they're gone. Own it for yourself, or it's a perfect gift for the other Ohio State fans in your life. Ohio State football is more than a game. It's a way of life. Now you can own a part of that way of life with this special limited edition Nike football, the exact ball Ohio State used in the college ball playoff. I got it tucked away for safekeeping. You can get yours tucked away for safekeeping as well. Go to biggameusa.com/Buckeyes and snag yours before they are gone. Mick, we got a couple more guys we're going to break down here. It's a now or never year for two more guys, in my opinion. Well, it's absolutely now or never for both of these guys. They're both seniors. They will be out of eligibility. I believe the word is exhausted. They will have exhausted their eligibility at the conclusion of the 2025-2026 college football season. Where's the national championship game next year?
Miami.
Oh, okay. Well, if they're there, we'll be there. But
you've never covered a Citrus Bowl type of setting, big guy.
It's orange, which is a citrus. Okay, we need to talk about that at some point. We're gonna do an entire offseason show about the fraudulent Orange Bowl and the fraudulent Citrus Bowl because orange is a citrus, and so we shouldn't have two different bowls. And peach is peach a citrus? We should not be having these citrus bowls that are not the Citrus Bowl. I'm gonna formally submit a protest to bowl season. The CEO of bowl season. I'm gonna get on Twitter and find him. Anyway, after the national championship game in Miami, Taiwan Malone and Lorenzo Styles Jr. will both have exhausted their eligibility. They're kind of lumped together in a weird little way because they both transferred from elsewhere and now are fifth year and final year seniors who are both on the defensive side, Taiwan Malone, a defensive tackle, who was buried behind Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton last year, along with Caden McDonald. Edric Houston started working in over him. And then Lorenzo Styles, who was buried behind, I think more understandably, Jordan Hancock last year. But as the year went on in November, that you could see that the seeds of trust were starting to be planted there with Lorenzo Styles Jr. In December, you saw that they fully trusted him. And in January, he was on the field during the national championship game and during that game against Texas. Like, the trust that he built over time shows me that he's going to be in the plans for this year in the defensive backfield for Ohio State. What capacity is that? Because I think if Davison Igbinosun and Aaron Scott or Devin Sanchez is really good, then Jermaine Matthews could play in the slot. I think if Jermaine Matthews and Aaron Scott or Devin Sanchez are really good, then Davison Igbinosun could do some stuff in the slot. Where does that leave Lorenzo Styles Jr.? I don't really know because the cornerback room is so loaded, including him. But if he's really good the rest of winter, we've got 1 day fewer than a month left in winter workouts, then spring ball starts. If he's really good in this 1 month and then he's really good in spring ball, he's going to have to play. And I think his path to playing time is a little more crystal clear than Taiwan Malone's is. Because Malone, behind him is Caden McDonald, who is really ahead of him, in my opinion, at that nose tackle. I don't think Taiwan plays the nose tackle as much anyway. I think Edric Houston is ahead of him right now as far as the three tech goes. Jason Moore and Will Smith Jr. are tantalizing in the way that their potential is way up here. I know Ohio State's really excited about the prospect of Jason Moore if he can finally put it together in year 3. I think Lorenzo Styles has a much clearer path to playing time as of February 18th than Taiwan Malone does, but that doesn't mean that both of them can't make that push this next couple weeks and into spring ball, and then by the end of spring you look up and say, man, they're going to be in the starting lineup or they're going to be a big part of this thing because we've seen the light come on late for some of these guys at Ohio State, especially on the defensive line. Like, it's hard to show Larry that the light's on. But once it comes on, he trusts you. And so I think that there's room for Taiwan to play, but it certainly is now or never for him and for Lorenzo, just because if they don't make it happen this year, like, they're out of eligibility.
Yeah, and I think it's weird. I think the path to Lorenzo Styles earning a starting role is a lot more clear. I think the path to potentially Taiwan Malone earning playing time might be as clear as well, just because I think they would like to be able to rotate some of those bodies inside. And especially if you're having a multiple fronts, I think there's a path to Taiwan Malone kind of rotating in. But like you said, he's just going to have to prove it to Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, and Matt Patricia, the new defensive coordinator, that he can come in and actually play at the level that some of these guys ahead of him are, like whether that's Caden McDonald or Edric Houston. I think they're playing at a certain level, and Taiwan Malone's got to get there. I think a guy like Eric Mensah in his redshirt freshman year probably could get some extra run too, because I think they like him as a big body. If you have to take out a 300-pounder like Caden McDonald, why not put another 300-pounder in there like Eric Mensah? I think there was some positive buzz. He always had an important role on the scout team when we were going through the bowl prep. So I think he's another guy inside, and like you said, so that adds some depth to the interior at that nose tackle 1 technique spot. And then you have the 3 technique where you have, assuming likely, Edric Houston, then you have Jason Moore, Will Smith. So then we're talking 5-6 guys. Where does Taiwan Malone fit in? I think he would like to fit in near the top of that, but it's up to him to kind of earn that and separate. It's the same thing with Lorenzo Styles. If you know he comes out of the spring with the starting spot, it's because he earned it, because there's a ton of talent in that secondary room and that cornerback room. So if he's going to come out of spring and be a starter, it's because he earned it. And I'll be interested to see if he can do that, because I think there was, and I think you and I even talked about it throughout the season, there's some concerns from my perspective on Lorenzo Styles in coverage, because it seemed like teams really like to go at him. So you need to be able to prove that you're not a liability in coverage when you have guys like Jermaine Matthews, Bryce West, Aaron Scott, Devin Sanchez. That might also be an option on the inside. If he can do that and establish himself above those guys, then I think you'll see him likely lock down that slot spot and be a good player for the Buckeyes. Otherwise, it'll be one of those young guys kind of going above him, which again makes it a make or break spring for Lorenzo Styles and Taiwan Malone.
Well, I think he was even like the 6th defensive back. I'm not talking about Malone, I'm talking about Styles. I think he was even the 6th defensive back on the field at some points, with Jordan Hancock, with the 2 safeties and the 2 corners. Like, hey, when we need, like, a true, passing down, like, he can come on the field as a 6th defensive back. So, like, there's room for him to play even if he doesn't start, in my opinion. But it just, if he's like the 2nd nickel, like, what does that really even get you? Because, like, I felt that, like, Jordan Hancock was the 3rd safety, but Lorenzo Styles was the nickel, if that makes sense. Like, I know they're the same position, but, like, it felt like when they came into, like, a dime package, like, maybe that's what a better thing to say, like, he's the dime and Hancock's the nickel. Like, they found a role for him, and I think that's telling that, like, hey, they knew they needed to get him on the field, even though there was some concern about the pass coverage, like you said. Like, teams kind of saw when 3 comes on the field, like, we're going to go after him. But as the season went on, he had a couple pass breakups later in the year where he was getting better in coverage. He was getting better and more familiar with everything. He was getting more comfortable out there, and you could kind of sense that comfort from him. I like the prospect of him playing. I just want to see it kind of come together and see if he can lock down a role, like you said. And for Malone, I just think it's a matter of, like, hey, I think now or never is, like, you're either going to play 10 to 15 snaps a game or you're not going to play. I don't know if there's a starting spot for him out there. I don't know if there's a starting spot up for grabs for him, just because I think Caden McDonald and Edric Houston are on such a clear, like, steep trajectory to being, like, the next up on this Ohio State defensive line. And so we'll see. We'll see, man. Those are 2 guys that are super intriguing. We talk Tegra Tshabola, we talk CJ Hicks, Bryson Rogers, Taiwan Malone, and Lorenzo Styles. Put them in order any way you want. We're not going to try to order them. Those guys all are good dudes. We talk to them, from time to time. That they're really nice guys. We just want to make sure that we're getting into the nitty-gritty right now, because we got nothing else to talk about. So it's like, hey, it's now or never for these 5. And tomorrow we're going to be back to break down 5 second-year Buckeyes who can make the push and keep some of those guys down off of the field, because they're making that youngster push into the 2025 depth chart, so maybe they can be the leaders in 2026. I'll have that story at lettermenrow.com on Tuesday, but then on Wednesday we'll break it down here on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. In the meantime, go to lettermenrow.com. You can get that coverage a day early You don't have to get it on the YouTube channel. You can read about it a day early, then come hear even more thoughts about it on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Like the video below, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get a notification when we do talk about these things. But go to lettermenrow.com, $1 per week for an entire year. $1 per week for an entire year at lettermenrow.com. You can read about all the things Ohio State football and hoops. We're getting into some hoops coverage, recruiting coverage from Mick and Alex Gleitman. Of course, go to biggameusa.com/Buckeyes and snag your limited edition Nike CFP football with the Ohio State logo on it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's fun to carry around the house. And then also go to rowback.com, Letterman 20% off your first order. I'm always going to be rocking the Rowback. You guys know that by now. That's Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.